I was spoken to like an old fool at my own daughter's table. The roast chicken was dry, overcooked, brittle at the edges like a page left too long in the sun, but I chewed it quietly, pretending I didn't notice. The clink of silverware filled the space where respect used to live. My daughter Elaine wore one of her designer blouses, all sharp lines and intention, sipping her wine like it was laced with truth. Richard, my son, had his sleeves rolled to the elbow and that smug smirk he inherited from someone other than me. They were both dressed for the part, hosts of an invisible performance, and I was the reluctant clown in the corner seat. "Dad," Elaine said, her voice syrupy with practiced patience. "You don't really need to worry about things like taxes anymore, do you? I mean," she glanced at Richard for the shared joke, "how much income are we talking about from your pension?" Laughter. Thin, sharp. I looked at my plate. Richard leaned in, fork stabbing a limp green bean. "What do you even do all day, anyway, besides polish that old watch like it's worth something?" I heard the ticking, faint, soft, lost in the orchestra of ridicule and clinking plates. My hand had rested on the table near it. I drew it back, slowly. The pocket watch sat like a relic between salt and shame. Gold once, now dulled. A gift from another time. Forgotten, just like me. "He probably talks to it," Elaine said, grinning at her brother. "Like a pet, keeps him company, ticks when he forgets how time works." My fingers curled in my lap. I didn't answer. What was the point? Their laughter ballooned, careful not to erupt, but enough to stifle the air. I looked around the room. The dining room Elaine had redone in faux European style, gilded frames on the walls, a chandelier that hummed slightly from the ceiling fan above it. My photo was nowhere. "You know," Richard said, chewing with open confidence, "we've been talking about the house, the old one, yours. It's probably worth something. Wouldn't make sense to let it rot if, God forbid, something happened. Might be smart to transfer it, for the family's sake." Elaine nodded, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. "It's not like you use all that space. Maybe something smaller? A nice facility, with people to help? You'd have more company, probably more conversation." That stung more than I expected. "You could finally stop worrying about that place," she added. "That place, my house, my home, where they learned to walk, to curse, to lie, where their mother died, quietly, before they moved on without so much as a backward glance." I reached for the glass of water. My hand trembled slightly. Age, yes, but also restraint. The watch ticked. A stubborn heartbeat in the middle of it all. No one noticed. Elaine leaned forward, her voice mock-sweet. "You know that watch is like you, old. Runs but doesn't really go anywhere. Stuck, charming if you're into antiques." I looked at her, and for the first time she looked back like I wasn't entirely invisible. Like maybe I might speak, but I didn't, because I knew if I did, I wouldn't stop. I rose from the table slowly. My chair scraped against the hardwood with a screech that made Richard wince. "Oh, come on," he muttered. "Don't be dramatic." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I reached for the pocket watch, feeling its familiar weight settle into my palm. It was still ticking, still there. I slipped it into my coat pocket like tucking in a child. Elaine gave an exaggerated sigh. "Honestly, Dad, we're trying to help." I turned to leave. The hallway beyond the dining room was dark, full of old photographs no one had dusted in years. Each one a version of them, smiling, laughing, younger, before they learned to look down on the man who took those pictures. The door closed behind me without a word, just the sound of ticking. The letter smelled faintly of old tobacco, Martin's kind. When the lawyer slid it across the polished oak desk, I nearly recoiled, as though touching skin too long dead. The room smelled of leather-bound ledgers and polished brass. In the single window, sunlight cut a clean line, illuminating dust motes that hovered like forgotten memories. "Mr. Crane," the lawyer said, voice measured. I nodded, hands clasped, the pocket watch inside my coat once more. I could feel its shape against my chest, solid, ticking. I had almost forgotten how its weight felt in moments not made of mocking laughter. "I have something here you should know," she said, reaching for a stack of papers. "Your friend, Martin Lowe, stipulated in his will that you are his primary heir." She paused. "Everything. His properties, his investments, everything in his name." I stared. My heart thumped. My stomach fluttered like a caged bird. The city noises outside, traffic, distant horns, children laughing in the sun, they all seemed to fade, replaced by something darker, immense. When did this happen?" I managed, voice cracking. The lawyer pushed forward more papers, bank statements, deeds, account numbers. I looked at them through blurred eyes, numbers with so many zeros I couldn't pass them, documents with addresses of mansions I'd never visited, investments, trusts, lands, companies I didn't know existed. "Martin died 2 weeks ago." The words were soft, but they struck like hammer on stone. I remember the taste of old grief rising again. He was gone. And now, I swallowed. I tried to steady my shaking hand. The watch slipped, my grip looser than I thought, but it didn't fall. I caught it. "But I thought—" My mind raced. He was alone. He had no children. Why did he never mention any of this? "He chose you," the lawyer said. "You were the only person he trusted to carry this burden. He said in writing that you understand suffering and silence, that you will honor what must be honored." I closed my eyes, the weight of this hidden fortune settling like lead in my chest. Generations of silence, humiliation, the late nights counting pennies in my crumbling house. It all felt like some twisted waiting room. And now the door was swinging open. I heard a faint click. I looked down at my watch in my hand. It ticked. The sound seemed loud in that hushed office, like an accusation, like a promise. The lawyer slid over a sheet that bore Martin's signature. Clean, deliberate, lines precise. And next to it, a note, probably dictated, "Walter Crane will be executor and sole beneficiary of my estate. No challenges should proceed without my express consent." My throat tightened. It was more than inheritance. It meant control. It meant dignity. It meant justice in Martin's memory. "You should be aware," the lawyer continued, "that Elaine and Richard have been named in smaller bequests, personal items, a cottage, some stock, but the vast majority is yours." My vision blurred. Anger, surprise, disbelief, they all fought inside me. How had this been hidden for so long? Outside, the light shifted. A breeze stirred the papers. The watch's ticking was firm now, resonant. It felt like the pulse of truth. I dropped the watch. My hand couldn't hold steady. It hit the floor with authority, a sharp note in that silent room. Wood, metal. I heard the impact, saw the shadow the falling watch cast. The lawyer looked up. I looked down. "Billions," I whispered. I sat in the dark, the numbers glowing in my mind. My living room smelled of rain, old plaster and damp wood soaking in the storm outside. The windows rattled faintly with the wind, their frames too warped to shut completely. I didn't turn on the light. Didn't want to see the cracked walls or the stained ceiling tiles. I knew them by heart, the way a prisoner knows each scrape in his cell. The bank statements were still folded in my coat pocket. I hadn't told a soul. Not Elaine, not Richard. Especially not Richard. They would never believe it. My hands curled around the watch. I wound it slowly, like I used to when Martin and I would sit on the bench in the park. Him watching pigeons, me watching time pretend to mean something. Tick, tick, tick. The sound cut through the quiet like a blade. I imagined the scene, the two of them, Elaine and Richard, seated across from me, faces stretched thin, disbelief thick in the air, me in silence. Dropping the papers on the table, watching their eyes scan each zero, each signature, each seal. Then I imagined Richard's voice, sharp and bitter. "Why didn't you tell us?" And Elaine's shrill disbelief. "How could this happen to you?" I would lean back in my chair, say nothing. Maybe just open the watch. Let them hear it tick. Let them hear how long I'd been waiting. But I said none of this, not even to myself aloud. because part of me didn't believe it either. I reached for the lamp, but left it off. Instead, I stared into the darkness and let my thoughts coil. Martin had trusted me, out of everyone. Not because I asked, but because I didn't. He once told me years ago as we walked home from the VFW meeting, the ones who don't beg are the ones who know what it's like to be refused. I hadn't asked for money when my furnace died. I hadn't asked when the roof leaked. I just patched it, quietly, with tar and prayer, and now I had more than they could imagine. I could buy their houses, their cars. I could donate to their children's schools anonymously and still have enough left to drown in. I stood and paced the floor, the boards creaking with every step. My knee ached, my back stung, but inside something stirred, something sharp and alive. The watch ticked louder now, like it was inside my skull, like it knew. I passed by the mirror near the hallway, saw myself in it, part man, part ghost, hair thin, shoulders hunched but eyes burning, not with vengeance exactly. Something deeper, justice maybe, dignity. I opened the front door, just a crack, and let the rain-slick air in. It smelled like beginnings, or endings. Then came the knock. I froze. 3 short raps, familiar, too familiar. I closed the door quickly, heart suddenly alive in my chest. Another knock, this one softer. I opened the door just a few inches. Elaine stood there, coat soaked, mascara streaked slightly at the edges. She didn't speak at first, just looked at me the way someone might look at a locked gate. "Dad," she said, voice almost fragile. "Can I come in?" Her eyes scanned the room behind me. "It's cold," she added, "and I need help. Just a little. Things are tight right now." I didn't move. I didn't answer. The watch ticked in my pocket, louder than her words. They wanted what I never had to give. Until now. Elaine stood in the middle of my living room, like a stranger who'd taken a wrong turn. She looked around, probably counting how many things hadn't changed since she left for college, and never really came back. The sagging couch, the warped coffee table, the framed family photo with her and Richard on the mantel, edges curling, glass cracked. "Nice to see you still live like it's 1985, she muttered, shaking off her umbrella and setting it on the floor with a wet slap. "It works," I said, settling into my armchair. My knees ached more when I sat, but I didn't let it show. I tapped the pocket watch once, still ticking in my coat, still faithful. "I'm not here to fight," she said, taking a seat across from me like it was a negotiation table. "It's just that things are tough. Richard's business deal went sideways and the stock market's a mess. We're trying to keep the house. You know, the family house." She said that like it didn't belong to me anymore. Like it had floated into some shared ether where they could divide and claim pieces. "So we thought," she continued, with that same syrupy smile she wore at the dinner table, "maybe you could help. Just for now. I mean, you don't really need all that equity tied up in your place, right? We could sell it. Help everyone. Everyone meaning her and Richard." I said nothing. The watch ticked louder under the silence. Her eyes twitched slightly when she noticed the sound. "Richard's coming over," she added. "He wants to talk too. Thought we'd all be better face to face." I nearly laughed. Not at the plan, at the timing, at the desperation behind her smoothed words and careful tone. A knock followed. 3 firm pounds. Richard never used the doorbell. I let him in. He stormed in like it was already his house, shaking water off his coat onto my floor. "God, this place still smells like mothballs," he said, not even a greeting. He dropped onto the other threadbare armchair. "Let's cut to it. We need help. You're sitting on an asset that's being wasted. Elaine told you?" I nodded. The air between us congealed. "We figure we sell the house," Richard said, clasping his hands like a CEO pitching a deal. "Put you in assisted living, good place, private, nearby. Then we reinvest what's left, for everyone's benefit. And maybe," Elaine chimed, "if you sign over some of the life insurance, we could bundle that into—" "No," I said. Just one word. Enough to stop them. Richard blinked. "No, Dad, be reasonable." Elaine leaned forward. You always said we were family. Family helps each other. No, you help when someone needs it, I replied calm, not when they smell money. Richard scowled. This again. You sit in this dump like some martyr, but you're dragging us all down. You're dead weight, Dad. That word. Dead weight. I heard it like thunder. My fingers found the watch in my coat pocket, curling around it like a talisman. I didn't respond, didn't argue. I just sat there, holding the past and the future in one hand, while they tore through the present like hungry wolves. They didn't see it then, the shift. But it had begun. Inside me, something long dormant stirred awake, not anger, not vengeance. Power. Elaine stood up first. Fine. We tried. When the bank comes knocking, don't say we didn't offer you a chance. Richard followed her, muttering curses under his breath. I didn't follow them to the door. I didn't watch them leave. I just sat, the ticking of the watch now louder than the rain outside. When the door slammed, the house was quiet again. Only the sound of the storm and that old steady tick. I whispered just loud enough for the room to hear, let's see who's dead weight. They didn't recognize me when I walked in. The hotel suite was opulence wrapped in silence. Velvet curtains draped over tall windows that looked down on a world they never thought I'd rise above. Crystal glinted from the bar cart, untouched. The scent of leather and something citrusy and expensive floated in the air like quiet proof. I stood in the doorway, straight-backed, wearing the suit Martin had once joked would only ever be used for my funeral. Navy wool, tailored, paid for in cash, the kind of fabric that made people look twice. It did now. Elaine and Richard were already inside, perched on the cream leather chairs like spoiled royalty, waiting for a verdict. When I entered, they glanced up, impatient. Then they blinked. Eyes narrowed, slowly widened. Dad, Elaine said first, unsure. You look different, Richard finished. His voice was a shade higher than usual. I said nothing at first. Just let the silence press into them like time itself. Then I walked across the plush carpet, each step deliberate. I sat opposite them at the glass-topped coffee table. From my coat, I drew the watch. The old gold gleamed now, polished to a mirror finish. It ticked in the silence like a countdown. Why are we here? Richard asked, trying to sound bored. His jaw was tight. I let the watch tick a moment longer before I spoke. Because I want you to see what patience buys, I said. Elaine shifted. This sweet. Did you win the lottery or something? I laughed. A low, clean sound that felt unfamiliar in my chest. Something like that. I reached into my coat again and laid down the folder, legal documents, statements, photocopies of trust papers, the will, Martin's will. They didn't reach for it right away. Elaine leaned forward, eyes scanning without touching. Her breath caught. Richard finally snatched the folder. He flipped pages with growing speed, like the more he turned, the less he'd have to accept. This can't be real, he muttered. It's very real, I said. Martin left everything to me, the estate, the shares, the accounts. Elaine looked at me like she was seeing someone else. Why you? Because I never asked him for anything. That silence again. Only the ticking watch filled it, steady as judgment. Richard stood, pacing now. So you've just been sitting on this, watching us struggle, watching us beg? Yes. He froze. That single word hit him harder than any lecture ever could. You bastard, he spat. You let us fall. You pushed yourselves, I said quietly. I just chose not to catch you. Elaine was still seated, staring at the watch. Her eyes glistened. All this time, I picked up the watch and laid it gently on the glass between us. It ticked louder now, like the room itself had become a clock. This, I said, was the only thing I had left. You mocked it, mocked me, called me useless, dead weight. Elaine's voice broke. Dad, we didn't mean... Yes, you did, I interrupted. And now, you want me to forget that just because the numbers shifted? Richard stepped forward. So what now? You want us to beg? Is that it? I looked at him evenly. This time, I said, voice low but unwavering, you'll beg, and I'll decide if I listen. The ticking continued. Louder than breath, Louder than words, the table was the same, but I was not. Same carved legs, same wobble on the left side, same view of the backyard through the smeared glass doors. Elaine had once thrown a fork across this very table during a tantrum over asparagus. Richard had spilled cranberry juice and blamed the dog. Their laughter, their fights, their noise, this table had borne all of it. Now it bore something else entirely. I watched them as they sat, eyes down, the folder still between us. Their once commanding postures had curled inward, protective, uncertain. Their designer clothes didn't look quite so polished now. They looked like children again, older, more brittle. "You asked me here," I said, fingers resting lightly on the edge of the table, the same spot where I'd once carved a scratch with a butter knife during a long, silent dinner. Elaine nodded. We didn't realize," she began. "No," I said. "You didn't." Richard exhaled through his nose, his voice tight. "We made mistakes, but we're family, and you're sitting on money that could help everyone." I reached into my coat, the watch again. I placed it gently on the table. It ticked, loud in the stillness. "Let's talk about help," I said. "Let's talk about what you helped yourselves to over the years." Richard shifted. "This again. You forged my signature." He froze. Elaine looked between us. "What?" I pulled another slip from my folder, a scanned copy notarized. A document Richard had submitted to a bank 7 years ago, using my name to co-sign a business loan that failed within 18 months. "I let it slide," I said. "Thought maybe you were desperate, thought maybe you'd own it someday." Dad, I needed it. You lied." The ticking filled the space that followed. I turned to Elaine. "And you called me senile. To your friends. Said I was a charming old relic." Her face drained. "That was a joke, just a stupid—" "I wasn't laughing." She fell silent, fingers trembling against her wineglass. "You mocked the only thing I had left. You stripped me of value in your eyes and pretended it was care." "We were scared," she said, voice trembling now. "You were so quiet. We didn't know what you were thinking, what you were planning." "I wasn't planning anything," I said. "I was surviving." Richard stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "So what? You're going to punish us? Make us grovel for a taste of what you have?" "No," I said. "I already did." Silence. "You don't get to decide who I am anymore," I added. "You forfeited that right when you stopped seeing me as your father and started seeing me as a problem." Elaine wiped her cheek quickly. "Please, Dad, what happens now?" I stood slowly, sliding the folder back into my coat. Then I looked at the watch, ticking louder than ever. I left it there, right in the center of the table. Its ticking was relentless, not angry, just certain. "That," I said, nodding to it, "was the sound you never heard. Time passing, patience growing teeth." I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, neither of them spoke. Only chairs scraped softly as they sat motionless in the gravity of their own undoing. I stood at Martin's grave, the watch no longer in my pocket. The cemetery was nearly empty, save for a few faded wreaths and an old man walking his dog at the far edge of the path. The trees whispered above, their branches shedding crisp leaves onto the damp grass. The sky was the color of pewter, muted, uncertain, like everything unsaid between me and the man buried beneath my feet. The headstone was modest, just his name, the years, and the faint outline of an eagle he once carved into a coin for luck. No extravagant epitaph, no marble angels. Just Martin Lowe, friend, brother, in silence. I knelt, slower than I used to, bones protesting but not enough to stop me. My coat brushed the wet grass. The envelope I'd brought, sealed with instructions for the last transfer of donations, rested beside me on the stone. Funds for the causes Martin had once mumbled about but never dared act on. Libraries, veteran shelters, a garden in the old neighborhood. I reached into my coat one final time and drew out the box. Walnut. Worn. Inside, lined with felt, rested the pocket watch. It no longer ticked. I had let it wind down that morning, on purpose. The silence felt heavier without it. It was always about the time, wasn't it? I whispered. Not the money, not the revenge, just the waiting. I set the watch down on the gravestone gently, like laying down a final truth. They saw me, I added, at last, and not because I shouted, because I endured. The breeze stirred the hem of my coat. I didn't look back, didn't need to. Elaine had called 3 times. Richard had written a letter, half apology, half calculation. I had yet to answer either. Maybe I never would. Or maybe one day I'd pick up the phone. Maybe I'd offer them not wealth, but clarity. But not today. Today was Martin's. I ran a hand over the watch once more, fingers tracing the worn edges. It had marked so many moments of my life. My wedding, my first night alone in the house after Mary passed, the births of my children. The day Martin pressed it into my hand and said, "Time will do more for you than I ever could." He was right. The wealth had changed nothing essential. The silence, that had changed everything. I stood slowly, brushing off my knees. The sky had lightened just a touch, a faint break in the clouds above. The wind paused. For a heartbeat, the world held still. I looked down one last time. "Time's yours now, old friend." And I walked away, leaving the grave quiet.